All right, 26th Sunday Ordinary Time. Again, we look into the Gospel of St. Matthew and we hear the parable of two sons whose father invites them to help him in his vineyard. The first son initially saying no, but turning around during the day and choosing to help his father in his vineyard. The second son initially saying yes, but then for whatever reason choosing not to. So, when I heard this initial parable, my thought was to reflect on that second son and his response and to think to myself what led him to say yes and to just kind of sketch out. And my thought is he's probably a yes man. Now, if you never heard this term yes man, it's probably like one of those old character sayings, but basically someone who says yes to everything that they're invited to do, and who finds him or herself so overwhelmed that they're unable to complete the tasks. I think, to be frank, many priests who genuinely want to be a good priest, including myself, can fall into the trap of being a yes man. And by saying yes to so many small things, small details, we end up not being able to say no for a greater yes. And the problem is, I think the temptation naturally of being a yes man is to say yes to all these little ordinary things, but by doing so, prohibiting opportunity to give that responsibility to somebody else. In other terms, in forgetting to recognize that we are truly weak by ourselves, that we should and that we could depend on others, most especially on God Himself. Because we want to do everything, we end up becoming independent beings, like trusting or believing that a whole responsibility or task falls on our own shoulders, rather than seeing that it can be shared, that a project or duty can be shared with others. The secret to saying no is that there is actually great wisdom in it, because in doing so, we can encourage other people to take on that weight and to share in the cross that the Lord gives us. And isn't that the point? Because in the end, if we all share in the cross of Christ, that we will truly be saved as one body of Christ. Now, that being said, on the other extreme, if we are to say no to everything, then obviously we fall into a certain idle laziness as well. And I think that was a certain danger for the first son when he said no. If you say no to so many things, you eventually also find yourself independent on the other severe end of the spectrum. And it's for that reason you look at so many saints who have had these miraculous conversions. Like, for example, you can take St. Augustine. And when you look at their lives and they have that conversion of heart, then it is from their faults and from that conversion that they have this fuel from their past faults to keep them going and steadily doing the Lord's will. Because in the end, what really matters is making sure that we're faithful to our yeses and our nos. And ultimately, we must be faithful to the Father's will, God the Father. And so there is this passage from the Furrow in which St. Josemaria shares about the need to rectify our will. He says, "What sort of Christian perfection do you expect to achieve if you are only following your whims and doing what you like? All your defects, unless you fight against them, will naturally produce bad works as their constant fruit. And your will, untempered by a persevering fight, will be of no use to you when a difficult occasion arises." So, when I look at these saints, it wasn't them trusting their own will. They trusted in God's will, and they entrusted that the Lord would give them the grace. That they're not capable of saying yes to every little thing, but that they only say yes to the one thing, which is God's will. And so long as they do that very task, as we hear in Matthew chapter 7, verse 21, we talk about those who come to the gate and say, Lord, Lord. And they share in confidence how they've done the Father's will. But those who actually did do it, rather than just saying it, are welcomed. So this is a great opportunity for us to really rectify our own wills, our own intentions, to take a good look at ourselves and ask, what is it that is keeping me? Am I saying yes to other tasks or duties that don't truly require my yes? Or do I say yes to those things that are my primary responsibility and obligation? Not giving in to other things by carefully saying no to those that don't pertain to my duties. So it's a great time to examine ourselves. I look forward to checking in with you next week. Thank you for listening, and now we begin.